Hi, everyone. This is Brian Asher, State Representative. Welcome to our next episode of What? Well, how about that with Rep. Ash? Today's guest, again, we're doing this via Zoom. Today's guest, former teacher here in Longmeadow, former superintendent of the Hampden-Wilbraham school system, and little known fact, he's a redhead. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Longmeadow Superintendent Marty O'Shea. Marty, welcome. Thanks so much for being on here.
Rep. Ash, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity and to join your illustrious program.
Yeah, well, my pleasure to have you. Marty, why don't we start off? I've known you for a little while now, but why don't we start off for the people at home? Obviously, school is about to start. Talk a little bit about, and I mentioned you were a teacher here before, maybe a little bit about your history, how you ended up back as the superintendent of Longmeadow and kind of what got you here.
Yeah, so you mentioned history. I was a former history teacher and got my start teaching in public schools here in Longmeadow and taught up until I think it was 2000 or 2001 and became an assistant principal at Longmeadow High and then eventually transferred over to Hampden-Wilbraham and became a principal at Minnechaug and superintendent over there. And then in 2016, when the superintendency opened here in Longmeadow, it was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up and became very interested in it. And then was fortunate enough to kind of come back to my teaching home here in Longmeadow. Right. Really exciting. One of the interesting things is that my office here as superintendent is only about 30 yards away from where I used to teach here at Longmeadow High in what was,
that's cool.
It was the old open space. It was a big, cavernous, giant orange area at the time, and it's been converted now, obviously with the high school renovation and reconstruction. But so literally, my office, my workspace now is almost It's less than a 9-iron away from.
That's a golf reference for those who weren't aware. Well, again, thank you and congratulations. We love having you as our superintendent here, and we're thrilled. Obviously, we've got a newer high school, which was built a few years back, or renovated and built new. Talk about some of the things prior to now. Obviously, we're in a unique situation, but maybe talk about when you got here. Maybe some of the struggles, some of the challenges, or some of the successes early on, and then we'll talk about obviously what's going on now.
Yeah, it was interesting when I came back to Longmeadow in 2016 and to see how the district had grown and prospered and progressed, and there was so many exciting things that had happened in the time that I was gone. And one of the most notable things, obviously, was the new high school, and so we're so fortunate to have this as a learning space here. And then, but across the district, the incredible investment that Longmeadow Public Schools and the town of Longmeadow had made in technology, both in terms of the tools that teachers and students were using, but also the overall infrastructure. And so it was exciting to come back to that, and they gave some great opportunities. And then, I think our emphasis since I've arrived has been on really taking a look at the holistic needs of children. And Longmeadow, like many districts, recognize that the social emotional needs of children need as much attention as their academic needs, and so. That's been it's been a big focus for us in the last few years, and also really working to align our practices and our curriculum across all 6 schools and making sure that it's a seamless experience for kids as they progress from pre-K right through 12th grade. So those have been 2 important things that have been a focus for us since I arrived.
When you talk, little off topic, but not really, we talk about the 6 schools. Can you talk about what are the plans for, like, where are we at population-wise for the schools? I know, and this isn't just Longmeadow or Massachusetts, but across the nation, the population of students has decreased. And Obviously, we've got our high school, middle schools, and elementary schools. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what the plan is, so people that aren't aware, maybe people that have moved in recently, that they understand, how the schools is 3, 2, 1, and
Sure.
where everybody's at with that.
Yeah, kind of recognizing that there might be some folks that are watching that don't have school-age children. We have 6 schools, 3 elementary schools that are K through 5 schools, except for Wolf Swamp, which also includes pre-K students.
Right.
We have two middle schools serving students in grades 6 through 8, and a high school serving students in grades 9 through 12. We have about 2,950 students or so. Long Meadow, like a lot of communities in Western Mass and really Massachusetts or across are seeing a downturn in student enrollment. Good thing is that the Long Meadows experience hasn't been as severe as, the downturn hasn't been as severe as what we've seen in other communities in Western Mass, sort of the further west you move, the further outside of the Springfield belt that you get, you see communities that are really dealing with some significant declines in student enrollment. And ours has been, fortunately, much more modest and manageable. And so where other districts are, have these wild fluctuations sometimes in enrollment, Long Meadow's experience has been more moderated. It's we're fortunate, obviously, to work and teach and learn in a community that's incredibly supportive of public education.
Right.
You mentioned the 6 buildings. Something that's occupied our time is sort of addressing the needs of our 2 middle schools, and the 2. Without getting too deep into that, they're 2 aging buildings that haven't experienced a major any type of significant renovation since they were built. And in my view, we're sort of at a critical stage with those 2 middle schools, and we're at a place where we need to be attentive to the sort of systemic issues that are there. If these were our homes, we would have already invested in electrical systems or plumbing systems, right, or HVAC systems, and so there's some,
or at least a big screen TV.
There you go. Yeah, and so those are really some critical needs that we need to, I think, come together as a community around to figure out, what the needs of our middle schools are, going forward.
That's a good point. I think sometimes people forget that, it's not only the academics, the music, the sports, but the structure has to be sound as well. And obviously everybody doesn't need a brand new school, but it says a lot about who you are as a community is the condition that you let your kids go into. So you want them at least to have the best possible, surroundings around them. You want it to be safe. You want it to be clean. You want it to be healthy. So I appreciate all that. As you mentioned, I grew up in Springfield. When I was new, Long Meadow, great school systems, and my wife and I, we've been here for 27 years now. Our kids went through the school and we're thrilled. And Long Meadow is obviously known for having great academics, great athletics, and great music and arts program. That being said, going back to last year, when you're looking at, class getting ready to graduate for 2017, all of a sudden COVID hits, and you, as well as your staff, the students, parents, and from all over have to kind of look and say, oh, what are we doing now? Especially in March, you're about to start on the spring sports schedule. Seniors are anxiously awaiting for graduation, for prom, for all the other senior activities. And then this hits, and why don't you tell us a little bit about how initially when it hit, your reaction or others' reaction, and then how those next few weeks, months, how it transpired to eventually say, all right, well, obviously everybody's leaving. What are we going to do now? How are we going to finish this up? How are we going to make the best of a really unprecedented and tough situation?
Yeah, it was really interesting how it all unfolded. And if I have the date correctly, I think it was March 16th was the first day that we were closed down. But in the in the month leading up to that, I remember, the conversations around the pandemic were not as alarming, right? I mean,
Right.
we were having conversations about, canceling field trips and foreign travel, and even when we went out on, I think it was, the 12th or the 13th that we made the decision. At that point, we thought, we just needed a 2 week period of
Right.
time to let this virus kind of run its course, and then that 2 weeks turned into a month, and
Right.
that was one of the challenges with the closures, that I don't think any of us knew on March 16th that we would be out for the remainder of the year. And so,
Right.
the plans and setup that we put in place were seen as something to kind of get us over a temporary closure, and obviously it turned out to be something much longer.
Yeah. And how did you adapt to saying, okay, now we know kids are going home. How do we teach them? How do we keep them moving? The seniors, they got a couple months left. How do you keep them engaged? Kindergarten, first, second grade, how do you keep them engaged? And how did you get to that point? And I know it's not just you, a larger group, but how did you get to that point? Because I know every school system did things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, it was like the lift that our educators made was incredible. I mean, they did something that had never, not just here in Long Meadow, but in other communities and across the country. They did something that really had never happened before in the history of education, right? I mean,
Right.
they pivoted from in-person learning to a fully remote model. And so, we had to reinvent so many practices and protocols, and, a lot of the tried and true approaches we had to put on the shelf for a while,
Right.
and take on a lot of remote practices. And we were fortunate. I think we were fairly well positioned here in Long Meadow to respond to that, in the sense that, number one, it's a community that's largely connected. That's not to say that there weren't families that we reached out to and assisted with internet connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Largely, internet connectivity wasn't an issue, and largely, students had access to devices. And even in the spring, when they didn't, we were able to issue hundreds of Chromebooks to families that were in need. And our teachers were also equipped with laptops to kind of deliver that regular remote instruction. But I think we learned a lot in the spring about how to best serve students in a remote arrangement. And I think a lot of the lessons that we learned in the spring, and a lot of the professional development that the teachers took part in this summer, that we'll be able to apply that this fall. So I think, obviously, as we look ahead to the fall, there's certainly some, there's still things we need to figure out, and we're anxious to get students in and dive into the work. But I think we're so much better positioned to instruct and teach remotely than we were in the spring when it hit us with such suddenness. But and it wasn't just the academics, right? It was responding, as you mentioned, responding to all the extracurricular programming, other programming, and that kind of thing. So,
when we talked before, I want to talk about graduation, but before that, have there been any things within the learning community or other things that have happened that you've adapted to that you or others might say, you know what, this is something we could probably continue regardless of how we're doing school, but this is just something we found to be extremely effective?
Yeah, I think a lot of the proficiency that we have with some of the learning management systems will benefit us, on the backside of this pandemic. So our teachers have become very proficient with using video conferencing tools. Obviously, Google Classroom is a learning management system that provides a platform for teachers and students to exchange assignments and for teachers to communicate with families. So our proficiency with those learning management systems is really just taken off. And, whereas back in February of this year, there might have been, a core of teachers that were really advanced. Now we've got nearly everyone is really ready to roll with using their use of those learning management systems.
Right.
And it. And there's people that are using Zoom that 6 months ago it would have been a challenge for them to
exactly
do that. And it's really been wild to see.
Why are you laughing when you're looking at me when you say that?
Well, it's funny. I heard a commentator today talk about. He was actually a podcast. He was talking about interviewing, the tech CEOs, and interesting it was to see people like Bill Gates trying to log onto a Zoom call.
You're right. But it is, and that's a kind of the thing I've been amazed at, that how much people, and not just within the school system, but just throughout the world, how people and businesses have really adapted. And some, as I mentioned, things that you say, this is probably more efficient in the future. And it, of course, we don't want to have anything like this, but it forced some people to engage in technology that they hadn't before. And I think it's helped, maybe some of the smaller businesses that might have, people that hadn't gotten into, websites, Zoom, any of this stuff. And now they're doing things a little bit more efficiently. Some businesses are running quicker, but I want to talk about
the way people collaborate too. I mean,
collaborative.
I remember in the spring seeing some of our music educators pulling students together on Zoom and doing compositions over Zoom, where each of the kids is, they're playing, they're doing their part with the instrument or vocally, and somehow it comes together in one presentation. And so much of that work was really, really inspiring, and on a whole lot of levels, it was inspiring, academically for the way the educators pulled it off, but the messages that kids were bringing out to the community through all these music videos that they were making, and was phenomenal.
Well, I'm always amazed with that too. Anytime we're faced with a horrific tragedy, whether it's personal tragedy or a worldwide like this, or 9/11, something of that sort, as bad as they are, it also brings out the best in people, and you see the best in humanity. When you're feeling down, like, oh, this it's horrible, it's really taking us away from our lives and our businesses, you see people step up and do incredible things, or like as you mentioned, some students. I don't know if you had any examples, anything some of the students or teachers or anybody have done that you're like, you know what, that's pretty good. That just makes me proud as a superintendent or just as a resident.
You mentioned graduation briefly, I think.
Yeah, and we'll talk about graduation too. We can segue right into that after.
Yeah, I mean that certainly stands out as an example of finding community and finding hope and finding inspiration in the middle of a challenging situation. And obviously it was rough on these seniors not to have that opportunity to walk across stage at Symphony Hall, but to see the way this community came together to support the class of 2020 was just amazing. And the effort came from every corner of this community. It came from parents who put together that the student signs on the green, and it came together with the DPW, arranging an outdoor space for graduation. It came together with the high school administrators pulling together that program, and obviously the students themselves, who kind of patiently waited for an opportunity for us to have an in-person graduation. That was one of my most proud moments as superintendent, because there are some communities, for reasons I understand, who needed to do sort of a drive-by graduation, but there was a commitment in all quarters to find an opportunity for kids to have an in-person graduation. And graduation's huge. I mean, it's the culmination of everything we do at Long Meadow Public Schools. So to have that as a special event, I was just so pleased to see how everybody pulled together. Even it required our fire chief, our town manager, the DPW, high school administration. I mean, to see people work across sectors the way they did to pull off that graduation with parents involved, it was just
Right.
amazing. You know, that didn't, I think we did it. There was a day where the state moved into whatever it was, phase two, where they started
Yeah.
to allow outdoor graduations. We did it at 11 o'clock on the first morning that it was permissible. So by my take, I think we had the first allowable in-person outdoor graduation in the state when we did it. So
We'll give that to you. We'll
yeah,
make sure that's on record now.
yeah,
But I think that is so important too. I mean, everybody was going through their own personal, professional struggles getting through this. And I was very cognizant, and I know you were, so many people were, about kids, you know what I mean, how they're dealing with this, how they're getting through. And I felt for the seniors because they're missed out on, you know, let's face it, your last few months of being a senior are so important because it's your time to say goodbye, to reflect on so much that, especially, you know, in a town like this, if you've grown up with these people your whole life, you come to a realization that this is probably the last time we're going to be spending time together, all of us, like this. And it is a special time. And to be able to, you know, to have to miss out on prom, to have to miss out on, you know, your senior picnic, to graduate, that's a tough thing for kids that are about to take the next step into adulthood, whether it's college, military, employment, whatever it is. So the fact that you and others and the parents came together to make sure that, and not just our community, I know other communities did this as well, but that just shows so much that people, you know, they come outside of themselves during times like this and they realize that, you know, it's not just about me. These kids, you know, they're missing out a lot more than, you know, more than a lot of other people. So really cool to see, you know, even the thing right outside the field in front of the high school where they had the emblem for the class of 2020. Every time I drove by, I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah, our maintenance guys, they surprised us with that, and it was
really,
painted it right into the side of the hill there.
Yeah, that was really neat and a nice touch. And I think people really tried to make the most out of a tough situation. Because I think about, you know, the kids who were playing sports and missed out their final year. They missed out on maybe a chance to break a record or make all Western Mass or all state or whatever it might be. But you got through graduation and then we hit the summer, and obviously there's still a lot of uncertainties throughout the summer. Things change, you know, from one week to the next. So I'm sure you and others were hopeful that we'd be able to go back to school, you know, in some sort of normal fashion. But as we got closer and closer, it didn't look like that was a reality. And I know I spoke with you we had a Zoom call, I don't know, a month and a half ago, with you and a couple of the other superintendents in my district. And at that point, everybody kind of had different ideas of what to do. And to me, that just showed how difficult this is, because you want to do what's right, but my opinion might be totally different from yours and vice versa, you know, and talked earlier about
I think
going back or not going back to school.
You know, you bring up a topic that I've been asked about a lot is, you know, why is every community doing something different? And, you know, obviously we were so hyper-focused on the needs of this community that that's where it has to start. But every community, you know, has different realities. Some communities are short on space for students, and they maybe started with overcrowded buildings to begin with, or and so the number of students that they could bring back for in-person learning was even more limited. Some communities use more buses, some communities use less buses. Some communities were well positioned technology-wise, and some communities were not. And so and of course, every community, you know, has its own sort of local health profile as well. So every community really had a different set of realities, and it created a lot of different arrangements. And that's probably, you know, I imagine a lot of the folks that might be watching this, maybe our employers in the region, are probably wondering, why is, you know, one community doing something different than another community? But I think it really goes to, you know, the space available, the transportation, the technology, the staffing, the health metrics in every community a little bit different. And so I think that might explain some of the variability. I think there was definitely a time in the summertime early on when all of us expected that there would be sort of a statewide directive.
Right.
In fact, we were told that. We were told that, that this would be very prescriptive and that the state would
Right.
provide, they actually said 85% of the direction, and that never came to pass. And so we found ourselves in July really trying to come up with our own sort of local opening plans. And it was a busy summer, and we were kind of collecting a lot of the state guidance, the federal advisories. We had a reopening advisory task force comprised of staff members and school committee and administrators and health professionals. And that group met several times. And obviously, we were doing a lot of planning administratively and with the school committee. So that whole process was intensely complicated and just required an enormous amount of work. I mean, I've never seen educators and school committee members and administrators work harder in my life. It was an incredibly busy summer. I think we have a plan that kind of is obviously prioritizes health and safety, but I think we have a plan in place that is going to bring as many kids back as possible for in-person learning in safe ways. So we're excited. We're excited to get going, I think.
Right. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the plan, what the plan is. And I just wanted to share too, because when we had that Zoom call with you and a couple of superintendents, it's something that I'd never even considered, but all of you had the same concern. It seemed like one of the biggest concerns logistically was lunch.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing the average person wouldn't even think that, oh my God, yeah, that is a problem. How do you feed everybody without taking up 2/3 of the day and still being effective?
Yeah.
And how did you overcome that? And then what is the plan in Long Meadow starting now, like moving for the next couple months?
Yeah, I think where we started, where a lot of this started was with what we call a pressure test. And that was, how many students could we safely educate and feed in the course of a school day while maintaining that 6-foot physical distance standard.
Right.
That 6-foot standard really became sort of one of the driving factors in terms of deciding how many students we could bring back for in-person learning safely. And to your point, one of the challenges was lunchtime, and take the high school here with nearly 1,000 students, and trying to move 1,000 students, in one day in and out of the cafeteria while maintaining that physical distance standard was literally impossible. We couldn't do it. And so that led us towards arrangements where we have this hybrid model, which it's interesting to me that, back in the spring when we used words like hybrid and cohorts and that kind of thing, no one knew. We didn't even know what we were talking about, but now all that verbiage has become sort of secondhand to everybody. But yeah, so we have a hybrid model where essentially students are divided into a few cohorts. One of the cohorts will be with us on Monday and Tuesday. Another cohort would be with us on Thursday and Friday. Wednesday is reserved as sort of a deep cleaning day.
Okay.
So you have those two cohorts that are coming to school. Essentially, you're cutting the school population in half at each school building on any given day.
And how did you do that? Is it alphabetical?
Alphabetically.
Is it okay.
Yeah, alphabetically, and we kept families, students together who are living under the same roof. Perhaps they have different last names, but it's done alphabetically.
That makes sense. Yeah.
We thought about arranging that by street address, but I'll spare you the details on that. But that didn't work out, so we divided it alphabetically, and then you have families that weren't ready to send their children back at all, and for a variety of understandable reasons, they elected to keep their children fully remote. So we really have some students who are with us Monday, Tuesday, some that are with us Thursday and Friday, and some whose families have elected to keep them home on all school days, and those students
Yeah.
would be taught remotely. So,
And how do you do that? Is there somebody dedicated to, I mean, how do you do it if you've got, one ninth grader, 7 juniors, and three seniors, how do you manage that?
That's and that's been the focus. A lot of the focus of our work this summer is preparing for that. We wanted to ensure that the remote learners, had access to the in-person instruction, and that was
Right.
sort of a starting point for us. And so the students who are at home will have some synchronous real-time access to the instruction that's happening during the school day, via tools like this, via Zoom or Google Meet. They'll have some real-time access to instruction, each and every instructional block. And so if you're at home learning, whether you're home every day or just 2 days a week or 3 days a week,
mm-hmm.
you have a specific schedule that you'll be expected to follow. And so if you have math class at 9 o'clock, you have, if you were in person, you would have math class at 9 o'clock if you're at home. So to our teachers' credit, they're creatively thinking of ways to keep those kids who are at home engaged, using a lot of different instructional techniques, using the technologies that they have.
So
now.
Is the student actually like, say there's 20 people in the classroom, 10, whatever it is, 10 people in the classroom, do they actually have a monitor and they're in the classroom, or is it a separate model that they do for the home?
The students at home would be on a Chromebook. So every student has been given a Chromebook, which is a laptop, essentially. It's a more affordable, kind of better educational tool. So every kid's got a Chromebook at home, and they are accessing the instruction via Zoom. And so the teacher would be on Zoom or Google Meet, and the teacher might deliver a mini lesson, might establish some instruction for that particular block. And then there might be a time when the students then are working both in class or at home. They might be working independently. So they close the laptop, they close their Chromebook, and then they've got a chance to work independently. And then maybe they reconnect with the teacher at the close of that instructional block. So we don't want it to be, it's not, live streamed education.
Yeah.
It's not, we don't want students staring at a laptop or a Chromebook for 6.5 hours a day.
Right.
We want them to use the tool wisely. We want them to be involved in some synchronous real-time stuff, but there'll be times when the students can work independently under the direction of teachers. And so, I think it's finding that balance between the live feed, Zoom, and finding times when kids can work independently or in a guided way.
Right.
Or maybe students can also collaborate, virtually via Zoom or Google Meet or other tools. So I think collaboration is you ask, what are some of the things that might, some of the good things about this that might linger with us. And I think it's, that we've understood even more the value of collaboration and how students can be in charge of their own learning, because that's what needs to happen here. And that's a good thing. We want kids in charge of their own learning.
Now, what about the kids? I've thought about this, and I'm sure you guys too, some kids need, like, even when they're in the classroom, they need that extra attention. They're not going to pay attention. If they don't have the teacher right in front of them, making sure they're focused, they're going to kind of wander off. How do you keep, if they're doing it remotely, has there been talk about making sure that these kids aren't dozing off, aren't getting lost in the shuffle?
Yeah, I mean, especially at the elementary level, each classroom would be served by a team of teachers. And so there might be, sort of the core classroom teacher, but there would be maybe a specialist or an interventionist who would be there to do the check-in that you're talking about, or perhaps a special educator or a paraprofessional. So the hope would be that the engagement and the check-in and the support doesn't fall completely on the regular classroom teacher that
Yeah.
even our adjustment counselors, to their credit, even they're doing the one-to-one counseling work with kids, checking in on their well-being. They did that in the spring, and then they'll continue to do that this fall. So that's you know that's been one of the really encouraging things that has come out of this as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, I'm not sure exactly when this will air, but school's about to start.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what happens day one? And obviously, we don't have to go past maybe November, December. I mean, because we don't know what's going to happen then.
Yeah.
But over the next couple months, what's the schedule like for you? You're already at the school. But the teachers, when do they come in? When do the students first come in? When does, remote, or who comes in when?
Sure. Yeah. So we're in this hybrid model, and it's sort of I call it a sort of, there's a delayed phase in, and I think the school committee made a wise decision when they sort of decided to start the in-person learning in stages. So the way this will work is next week, all students will be involved in remote learning. So school starts, the first day of school is September 14th, Monday, September 14th. So that first week, everybody's remote. The exception to that is some children with intensive needs will be served in person next week. But for the most part, everybody's remote next week. And then on September 21st, our elementary hybrid model kicks in, where half the students will come in on Monday, Tuesday, and then the other half on Thursday, Friday. The week after that, we start with the hybrid model with the middle school. And then the week after that, we start with high school students for in-person learning. So we'll kind of gradually phase this in.
Right.
And I think it's a good thing, because it kind of gives us some experience with bringing students in on a gradual basis. And there's been just a lot of work in terms of getting some clear safety protocols in place, implementing the health guidelines, improving facilities, getting everything in place to make sure that we're ready to go. So it's sort of a phased in approach that we're using, and at the end of the day, the virus is in charge, right? I mean, we have to be prepared to go fully remote if conditions call for it.
Right.
And maybe, there'll be some opportunities to bring more kids in for more in-person learning if the virus permits. And the virus,
and obviously, like you said, the virus obviously is controlling. Hopefully we get it under control in the next couple months, and we can start moving on with our lives. But speaking of that, now, is there a process? Do you do any testing at the school, or people are involved? Like, how would you know if a student or staff member contracted, and if they did, what's the process from there?
Right. So before they come in, like in a lot of workplaces now, the staff needs to self-certify. They have to attest the fact that they are symptom-free, that they haven't been in close contact with someone, that they have abided by the Massachusetts travel restrictions, and so that's an important consideration. The cohorting model that we have has created small groups of students, so that if there is some transmission in the community, or hopefully not, even if there was some transmission in school, we would be able to sort of quickly isolate that individual and begin the contact tracing to identify any other individuals that might be affected. When that happens, the first communication would happen between the Board of Health and school officials. And so we would have, one of the things that's encouraging for me to know is that the Board of Health, through a registry that they have access to, the Board of Health, they're aware when community members test positive.
Right.
So they're able to be in touch with us so that we can start to work with them to do that contact tracing and then respond accordingly. And I've sort of assured staff that we're going to err on the side of caution, and
Right.
if we need to close down a school or if we need to go fully remote across the district, we will. Part of the reason that I feel good about that is that the remote learning that we will have in place will be so much more robust than we were able to provide back in the spring. So, I'm confident that even if we did have to go to a full remote model because of some transmission, that we're ready. We can do that overnight, literally. I mean, we can switch from in-person.
Hopefully don't have to, but that is good that you've kind of fine-tuned that where you can, in case this or God forbid anything else down the road ever happens, you say, you know what, we're prepared for something like this. Totally. Now, what about students? Do they have to be tested before they come in or anything? Or
The Department of Education, Mass DPH, CDC, they don't recommend testing for students in a K-12 environment. I know a lot of higher ed institutions are doing that, but that has part of the recommendation here. It's been more about kind of working closely with families and help to understand transmission rates. We're fortunate right now where our transmission rates locally and regionally are low, but the school committee has asked for a sort of a weekly report on that, and they've had at each of their weekly meetings lately, Fire Chief John Dearborn and the Health Director Beverly Hirschhorn have been at their meetings to kind of advise them on where things stand regionally. So, it's obviously a very serious thing that we want to be incredibly attentive to, and like I said, we would err on the side of caution if we need to go to a more remote model.
Right. Well, that's good. It sounds like you guys have thought out, different scenarios, good, bad, indifferent. What happens, how you adapt to it. How about obviously we talked about last spring. Obviously everything got shut down, the spring sports. What about fall? Sports have been canceled for MIAA is canceled.
The MIAA, working with Mass DPH, has created an avenue for high school sports to continue, and which is
talk to me. Tell me how's that work?
Yeah, so there's
that's a how about that moment? There you go. There's a transition.
It's interesting because what I will remind myself and remind anyone that I'm talking to is that the health and safety protocols that we need to have in place in a dense building with hundreds and hundreds of kids, or up to 1,000 at the high school, is different than the protocols you need to have in place for a practice with a small number of kids. And so the MIAA has put out DPH approved athletic guidance. And so there's some very strict protocols about how to conduct practices and what types of competitions are allowable.
Okay.
So we're limiting, there's no locker room use. Students have to mask at practice. Practice groups will be smaller. You can't have your full team.
And what about are they playing high school football?
So no football.
I was going to say that'd be a tough one because there's so many kids.
Football practice will be permitted, but there would be no football at the competition level. So there is some small group football activities that can go on, and any hope for actual football games is bumped to a second winter season in February and March. So if there's, if conditions allowed, if there's enough interest in the area, there might be a football season.
So they're going to try to fit in all the sports throughout the county, if permissible, all the sports somehow get. That's good.
Cheerleading and football were deemed to be sort of the highest risk, and in volleyball, and then soccer, and I'm talking this fall, soccer and field
So are
hockey.
they going to play soccer in the fall?
We'll play soccer
Yeah.
with a modified set of rules, which, you know, for soccer purists, as they look at it, it's hard for them to kind of get their head around that. But you know,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, for me, it's let's get the kids outside, let's get them
Yeah, if you
moving.
can, sure.
It's
That's,
just
I mean, and you know too, it's all about mental health as well.
totally,
And
yeah.
yeah, you can't just do frivolous things, but you want kids to be able to experience life and their passions and be able to do these things with some sort of normalcy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we have a student body where 80% of our kids play, I think, one high school
Right.
sport. And so, you know, creating those safe opportunities for them to be outside with their teammates and with their coach. I mean, you know, it's so important to keep kids engaged after school.
Right, because it's more than just playing that sport. It's about learning to depend on one another, the quality of team or the importance of team, you know,
Yeah.
interacting with others, competition, all those things are such a crucial part of growing up too.
Yeah. And then in those sports where we are able to have some competitions, you know, they'll be limited. We're not sure whether there'll be some varsity competitions,
Hmm.
and the amount of travel that kids do will be severely limited. So
Right.
it'll be a different experience. But I know our high school kids, they're super excited to have this opportunity, and you know, I'm looking forward to seeing kids out.
Yeah. And it's good. And you know, unfortunately, like I said, you know, we lost out on the spring sports last year, but it was nice. I mean, too bad, but the boys hockey team ended up being co-state champs, which is nice. Too bad, you know, couldn't do something big for them, but
Yeah, the an MIA rep came out to the school. I think it was probably in May or something, and it brought the state championship trophy, and a couple of the kids gathered in front of the high school to have to.
oh, that's cool. I mean, at least they get something out of it. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it's too bad they missed the opportunity to play at the Garden, but
yeah, right. To play on the Garden Ice would have been an amazing experience for these guys.
yeah.
We'll get it back.
Yep. Yeah.
We'll be back in the hunt.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be nice to just see people doing activities, just being out there eventually when we get to that point. Anything else going on at the school, that exciting, new, anything you want to talk about outside COVID or regarding that people should or could or would want to know about?
No, I think, you know, we're obviously living in some interesting times and some turbulent times, and
Yeah.
you know, we recognize that there's been a lot of racial unrest and sort of
Yeah.
coming to terms with some of the systemic racism that we've seen.
Now, does the school do anything with that? Any assemblies? Any?
Yeah,
How do you address that?
you know, certainly our teachers will look for opportunities to have those conversations with kids, but at a more sort of district level, we have partnered with an organization called the Center for Leadership and Educational Equity. It's a
Yeah.
outfit out of Rhode Island, and they did some professional development for us this summer, and then in the fall, we're going to be pulling together a sort of a steering committee to kind of take a critical look at how we can promote equitable practice here in Long Meadow Public Schools. So
Good.
we're looking forward to launching the next stage of our work with that organization. So yeah, I mean, our attention has been focused on responding to COVID-19, but there's other strategic.
Well, life still goes on, right?
Still
I mean,
goes
and
on,
the
yeah.
other trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I found this too, that it's amazing. You know, when my kids were in school, or even now looking at the student body, kids are so much more accepting of race, sexual preference, all those things than maybe an older generation. So there are some good things out there that I see, that a lot of the younger people don't look at things that maybe an older generation did, just based on life experiences, you know, and things like that. So that is refreshing to see a younger generation look at people different. Obviously they have other concerns, but that is one that I think they're better than our generation, the generation before us, and hopefully it continues to go like that.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. I mean, we have a lot to learn from children as well. They can
really do, yeah.
as much as we're teaching them, we learn from them every day as well.
Yeah, Well, that's great. Well, Marty, I just want to say thank you so much for being on What with Rep Ash. I appreciate it. I mean, obviously it'd be nice if we were in person, being able to do this, but for you to take the time, I know you're getting ready. You get in a couple of days, school starts, so you got a lot of stuff going on. So I appreciate that, and I know the people at home, whether it's the parents or the students watching, just to get an update to kind of understand that things just don't happen, or people aren't doing it. There's a lot of stuff going behind the scenes from in March all the way through the summer up until now, and changing on a dime at some points because information changes and you've had to change depending on the information you get, and working with the school committee. And there's a lot of moving pieces. So I tip my hat to you, the school committee, and you know, all the staff and throughout the town and throughout the Commonwealth. I mean, a lot of things have been going on. It's not perfect, but I appreciate it, and I know people at home must appreciate it as well.
I appreciate the conversation. Appreciate your advocacy for us at the state level, and appreciate you and your sister Vomit keeping us informed and up to date on all the developments coming out of Boston. So thanks so much.
Oh, you got it. You got it. Thanks, and look forward to be able to see you in person sometime soon. And good luck with the start of this school year. Hope to see you at a game or something we can.
Let's hope so. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah, bye.